If I talk in here, they can hear me. Everybody can hear me. Just checking to make sure everybody can hear my voice. Okay, it's 7:01, so we're going to get started. Pastor Shule will join us momentarily, I think, but thank you everybody for being here this evening. So it's my pleasure at this time to call the March 19th special meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education to order. Couple of things, quick things that I will say, three quick things that I will say. First of all is thank you to Dr. Polio and the JCPS team for all the hard work that they've been doing to provide opportunities for our students, academic opportunities, as well as food, breakfast, and lunch opportunities also. And to the board members that are taking emails and responding to folks as we move forward. There were two quotes that I had for tonight. They're both short quotes. The first one is from Maya Angelou, and it talks about strength. She says, "You may not control all the events to happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." So we cannot control what is happening to us, but working together, we will move forward. And Helen Keller, "Alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much." So thank you, Dr. Polio, you and your team. I'd like to thank the communication that has been open to our city from the mayor and his team and from the governor every day, giving us an update as to where we are. So I would like to thank everybody for their hard work, and thank you to the board members for being here this evening. The first thing that we need to do is to approve our meeting agenda. Is there a recommendation? Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Brady, seconded by
Mr. Craig.
James Craig. Okay, and because we're doing it this way, I'm going to do like a roll call. So to get everybody's, so it's a yes or no. So, and I'm doing it by district, except I'll be last. So the first is Mr. Cole.
Yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Marshall.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Brady.
Yes.
And Diane Porter, yes. And we will move on then to, we have the recommendation for the approval of our minutes of previous meetings. Is there a motion to approve? We have 3 minutes, February the 25th, February the 26th, and March the 10th. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So
Mr.
moved.
Brady, second by Mr. Marshall. All those in favor, I'll start with Mr. Cole.
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan.
Yes.
Pastor Shule has joined us and we're voting on the minutes. Pastor Shule, do you approve the minutes of the 3 meetings?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Brady
Yes.
and Diane Porter, yes. Thank you. Moving on, it's my pleasure at this time to introduce our superintendent for the superintendent's report, Dr. Polio.
Yes, thank you, Chair Porter and board members. I wanted to bring you the superintendent report for March 19th. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you all. I know this is a brand new thing for us to do it this way, but obviously we've all stepped up and made sure that we could continue on with board meetings. So thank you very much for that and your support. And it's indicative, I think, of our entire organization right now. Clearly, we are going through challenging times as a school district, as a community, and as a nation. And I just really wanted to, the most part of my superintendent's report is to highlight the work that's being done in our district right now. So it was right about 2 weeks ago yesterday was really the first time that we knew that we were going to have significant impact in our district. And bringing our team together and putting together a plan in such a quick period of time, from making difficult decisions like canceling travel out of state to eventually canceling school, to having if the vast majority of our staff members telecommute and setting up a system to do that so we can effectively implement that. The amount of hours that have been put into the work around this organization and this district has been immense, and everyone has stepped up to support our students. And, you know, I just know it because I'm on multiple Zoom meetings a day. Zoom meetings are getting a little tiring, but I know that's the way it's going to be for a period of time now. But I just see the amount of people who are working so hard from their home right now to prepare and develop and support kids. And it's this is a time, and I challenged that we had principal meetings for the first time by Zoom. And I challenged our principals to say that this is when we get to step up and shine as leaders in our community. And I believe when we get through this difficult time, we'll be better as an organization because of it. And I think you will see great leaders and great teachers step up to meet the needs of our kids. I also want to thank our custodial staff and our maintenance staff and all of operations who continue to work and clean and do amazing work throughout all of our buildings to make sure we're doing that. I want to thank our nutrition workers who are serving an incredible amount of meals every day. So our first day, Monday, we served about 5,500 meals, which was about 5 times the first day of summer of what we serve. And I just think it goes to show how much need is out there. The second day, it was over 8,000. Yesterday was over 10,000. And today we served over 12,000 meals in our community. So in 4 days, we have served over 35,000 meals to our community in over 50 sites, I believe we're in right now. And so many people are stepping up to meet the needs of our kids. We're adding sites. And I think we will only continue to increase that amount. And so from our custodial staff, maintenance staff, central office, teachers, we found so many teachers who are continuing to communicate with kids right now to support them. It's just been very inspiring to see this community in JCPS step up. And so let's talk a little bit about moving forward. So I will be having another press conference tomorrow evening to update our community. We're working hard to make sure that we continue to communicate. We know there's a lot of angst out there and concern about where we're going to be and what we're going to do in school coming up in the weeks to come. And so as we know, we are out tomorrow, and then next week, we have spring break the following week. And right now we are scheduled to be returning on April 6th. I've been very clear that I find that to be highly unlikely that we will be back at that time. I anticipate that we will be out multiple weeks past that. And so right now, we have been preparing since last week. I've told you about my concerns about non-traditional instruction and NTI and the equity involved in that, and we'll be addressing some of that. But we know that we must support our kids, and if we are going to be out longer than April 6th, we know we have to provide learning and instruction for our students. So earlier this week on Monday, I commissioned 2 task forces within our organization. The first task force, led by Dr. Coleman, was to create a platform for our teachers and our schools to be able to implement NTI instruction in an effective way. A very strong team was put together of about 20 to 25 educators. We'll be running this through our principals, but in 4 days, I was on a conference call this morning with that team, and in 4 days, what they have put together to support our students is incredible. And compared to every other major city that we've looked at, which essentially many times just says, here is an online platform, a software company that will provide some instruction. We are providing a complete platform. We are essentially developing a virtual school in 4 days. And with that, it will be based for every grade in every school, and it will give opportunities for teachers and schools to have an incredible amount of supports with curriculum and lessons, but still allow teachers to provide content as well. So we will have teachers who will be having meetings with kids in Google Classroom, communicating with their kids. We're developing expectations around what that will look like so that they can communicate and provide learning for all of our students. We still have a ways to go with that, so we're not quite there yet. We will have things like virtual libraries for teachers to access. And it is going to be a very powerful model that I think will be one of the strongest in the country when we are done with it. And so really creating that content. The second big part of the task force that we put together is led by Dr. Belcher, which is essentially how are we going to get devices to more students? And so we are putting together a plan where we are going to have 25,000 Chromebooks that are going to be available to families throughout the JCPS community. We are going to get them from our schools. We've told our principals that, yes, we're going to have to get these and get them out to students. We can't have them in an emergency collecting dust in a school right now. We need kids having access to this technology. And so we are going to work on a plan in the next 5 to 6 days and over spring break of getting 25,000 Chromebooks out to students and families so that kids will have access to it. We've guaranteed our schools on the back end of this that we will replace every Chromebook for that school that is not returned. And I believe in the end, we will actually increase the amount of student technology we have out of this. But most importantly, in a crisis time, I believe we have to step up and make sure as many kids as possible have a Chromebook in their hand to do the work. And then the final leg of that is connectivity. We know without connectivity, the Chromebook won't do a lot of good. And so we are pushing, working with Metro government and pushing a lot of the carriers to find ways to meet our families' needs, whether that be Spectrum, Verizon, T-Mobile. We're on conference call every single day with the city government to try to push ways to get more connectivity for our students. And so that's the work we've been doing over the past 4 days. It's been busy, but I think in the end, in 2 weeks, we are going to have an incredible platform for our students. And we know finally we're going to have some options for students that don't have the Chromebook or connectivity, where we still provide paper copies for students to do this work. How we are working on this plan, and you'll hear a little more about it, is that NTI cannot negatively impact any student. We need to make sure it only supports our students. And that's the lens we are coming from in this difficult time. And we've challenged our school leaders. They're going to have to step up and really lead during this time, because they will not have their teachers in a building where they can meet with them. All of our meetings are going to have to be virtually, and this is just going to take a level of leadership that we haven't seen. But I believe in the end, we're going to be a stronger organization as a result. So I'm proud to bring you that plan tonight so that you can see what you will be approving that's been approved by KDE, so that we will begin to work on that on April 6th. And then finally tonight, I did want to highlight that, we'd have liked to have done this in person, but we are also officially naming our Females of Color STEAM Academy tonight. The proposal is to name the Academy in honor of Dr. Grace James. So I just wanted to tell everybody a little bit about Dr. Grace James, who spent her life caring for African-American students and the community of Louisville, Kentucky, who often had little access to regular health care. She was one of the first 2 African-American women on the faculty at Southern Medical School and the first African-American woman on the staff of Louisville's Children's Hospital and the faculty of U of L School of Medicine. She was also a role model and advocate for African-Americans considering a career in medicine, which I believe fits very well with the STEAM Academy. In fellowship application addressed to the National Urban League before she entered medical school, she explained that she decided to pursue a career in medicine because of interest in human suffering and the suffering of African Americans in particular. Dr. James made good on that promise when she moved to Louisville in 1953, opening up a private pediatrics practice and a walk-in clinic on 18th and Broadway, serving Louisville's impoverished West End residents. She worked for the Louisville and Jefferson County Departments of Public Health, which I think is very appropriate for the time that we're in, acted as a pediatrician for the West End Daycare Center, accepted position as instructor in child health care at the University of Louisville School of Medicine. She became affiliated with 8 Louisville area hospitals and became the first African-American woman on the staff of Louisville's Children's Hospital and only one of 2 Black women on the faculty of a Southern medical school in the early 50s. In 1976, James opened the West Louisville Medical Center at 23rd and Broadway. It's estimated she saw roughly 100 patients every week in that clinic, mostly from the neighborhoods of Russell, California, and Shawnee. She was known to break from patient visits so she could gather parents in the waiting room and conduct impromptu lessons on parenting and healthy living. Financial struggles unfortunately forced the clinic to close, but James continued to practice medicine until the day she died of heart failure in January of 1989. And finally, in the 70s, she headed the Council on Urban Education, a citizens group striving to improve educational outcomes for Black children. She founded the Teen Awareness Project with a goal of reducing teenage birth rates among African American girls. James wanted to heal both those she examined and those she never saw. And I think this is very appropriate. In the days after her death, a civil rights leader and former Jefferson County School Board Chairman, Laken Cosby Jr., told the Courier-Journal she was not only an outstanding physician, but an outstanding social achiever for the poor. And so I think it's a great honor that we recognize someone locally who made such an impact on this community as Dr. Grace James for our Females of Color STEAM Academy. And I thank everybody for their patience as we have worked on that. So that is the superintendent's report. We're excited to bring you that and our NTI plan tonight. And we know that probably several board meetings in the future will have to be conducted like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. As we move forward, I am glad to say that I had the opportunity to know Dr. James, and she knew some members of my family. So thank you for the team that has put that together. The next item on our agenda are our action items, and the first one is the adoption of the resolution regarding the meeting protocols for novel coronavirus COVID-19. And this came thanks to Tyson Gorman, and we have gotten information from the Kentucky School Board Association. So this is the format that we're following after the governor has made the announcement about everyone staying safe and the lack of people needed to congregate for meetings. So at this time, first of all, I will ask for the motion first. And if there are any questions, Tyson Gorman is here this evening to answer any questions that you might have. So is there a motion to adopt the resolution regarding the meeting protocols for the coronavirus? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Craig, seconded by?
So seconded.
Seconded by Mr. Brady. Okay, are there any questions before I call for the vote? Hearing none, we will move forward by calling for the vote. First of all, Dr. Cole, Dr. Chris.
I vote yes.
Thank you. Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Pastor Shule,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Diane Porter, yes, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item on the action item, which is the recommendation for approval of JCPS non-traditional instruction emergency application. And Dr. Polio, I will turn it over to you if there's anything you want to say to us before we call for the motion to move this forward. Dr. Polio, if there's anything that you would like to share with the board.
Sure, and I wanted to bring Dr. Coleman into this. I'm hoping that she is able to pop on the screen. There she is, Dr. Coleman. So there she is. So, and I just want to, first of all, thank our team for this. So just so you know, as we saw that cancellations were imminent about last Tuesday, so about 9 days, we began to see that it was just a matter of time. I challenged Dr. Coleman and her team that we needed to provide a great platform for supplemental materials, which are optional. And her team responded to that very quickly and put together choice boards, which we've seen parents doing some good stuff with that. And so that was released on Thursday. And as I usually do, I called Dr. Coleman into my office 3 work days later on Monday and said, I think we're going to have to do some NTI. It looks imminent to me. And we're really going to have to provide some great materials, instructional materials that go well beyond that and allow teachers to also have the opportunity, a platform to put their own things in. And I just can't, in 4 days, it's just been incredible the amount of work that they've put into that. So that's a part of our NTI plan. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Coleman and just let her give you a short rundown of what we plan on doing with NTI.
Okay, yeah, so it was 2 weeks ago tomorrow when we started working on the supplemental plan for our students, just in an effort to keep them learning, knowing that we were probably facing an extended closure. We've gotten lots of great feedback about those. And then as Dr. Polio said on Monday, he said, we're going to have to tackle this, I think. So we formed a task force that afternoon, composed of assistant superintendents, EAs, JCTA members, ECE, ESL, early childhood staff. And we met for the first time the next day on Tuesday. And the charge that I have given them is to create the best learning experiences possible for students throughout the extended closure. So we even said, whether or not we go into NTI, we want to be sure our kids are having the very best experiences possible. I cannot say enough about my team and what they've done, and Dr. Belcher's team led by Heather Worrell. They have produced just an unbelievably great work. So we started Tuesday by dividing into several smaller groups focused on specific topics. Those included teaching and learning, digital tools, guidelines for teachers, guidelines for students, guidelines for parents, and communication. Ultimately, our goal is to provide recommendations by level, including early childhood, for the components of each student's NTI experience. We want to include, we're going to recommend resources to use, strategies and ways to approach digital learning, as well as how to approach communication in this time, and even grading and feedback. How do we handle that? Because we only want this to be a win for our kids. So we are in the process now. That group meets no less than every other day. Today we met, and we're also meeting tomorrow. We have a really short timeline. We are building a website that will serve as a one-stop shop for teachers, parents, and students. The website will contain the information I shared previously. In addition, students will be able, this is really neat, so students on the website will be able to find their school on the site and go directly to their teachers' Google Classrooms. There'll be a section for teachers, for students, and for parents. We're working hand in hand with Renee and her team to plan for communication with all stakeholder groups. We're creating videos for parents, for example, about Google Classroom, and we are actually test driving it with parents now. Principals and teachers are working with teams by level to make recommendations for each level for the various aspects that I talked about. Our goal is to have the plan completed by Wednesday, March 25th. So that's this coming Wednesday. And we will ideally by then be ready to roll it out.
So just to kind of wrap up a few things. So, we're challenging our school leaders that everyone in the building, no matter if they're administrators or resource teachers, those that aren't teaching kids must have a role in supporting this work. Every resource teacher at central office must have a role in supporting the work to make sure that we do that. A big challenge for us will be obviously special education to make sure that we're providing the services. So Kim Chevalier is working with her team to make sure the special ed services are provided to our students. And then us also, that we have hotlines here that if anyone is having technical difficulties, content difficulties, that they can call right to us during school hours or work hours, and we can answer questions immediately. So it's going to be a all hands on deck type of work for us that we got to make sure of. We are also looking at right now moving a professional development day that was scheduled for Oaks Day and moving it to April 6th. And so allowing our teachers a day to really dig into it and prepare and get ready on that April 6th, while kids and parents are using that to make sure that they have the supports necessary to dig in, logging on, having all of those things, and then really going live with it April 7th. And then we will take the traditional Oaks Day will be an NTI day. We'll have to bring that back to you as well. But then also looking at potential of, if we're still there, having election day also be either NTI or instructional day, depending on what happens between now and then. So along with that and getting 25,000 Chromebooks out to families and working on getting internet to many of our families that don't have it, we got our hands full in the next few days, but we're very proud of the plan that we're putting together to support our students. We'll be happy to take any questions or comments that you have.
Questions from the board? I hear no questions.
I think
So,
Dr. Kolb has one.
oh, I'm sorry. He's not on my screen. I'm sorry. Dr. Chris, I apologize.
No, not at all. Marty, can you just say what kind of issues or as we try to work with the city and Wi-Fi providers, how's that going in general? And what are the kind of challenges that you guys are trying to overcome?
Well, quite candidly, the challenge we're trying to overcome is providing Wi-Fi for our students who need it so that they can do the work in a crisis time with obviously companies who are trying to make a profit as well. And getting over that challenge of we need internet providers to step up and say that we are willing to support our children, whether that means we're providing it or an outside foundation is providing it. Just for example, I mean, we've looked at what would it be to give 20,000 hotspots out. But I mean, just looking at what that would cost from the minimum amount of months we would have to do it would be in excess of $7 million just for 20,000 of those. And so really overcoming that challenge of a company stepping up. So Spectrum, we will be doing some work with Spectrum where they're willing to step up and provide free service to our students, JCPS students, for 2 months. And we're happy with that partnership, but that's not nearly going to cover every kid that we have. So we keep pushing these providers to make sure that they find ways to support kids in a crisis situation where it's not a profit situation that's happening.
Do we know, have you had any discussions with either the governor or mayor or Metro Council about if the state or city has any power to more or less kind of dictate to the companies, that they make things available for this purpose?
I haven't had those where they forced it yet. I haven't spoken to the governor since this started, so I can't say that. I know the city is working and pushing hard, but we haven't had any conversation yet about forcing that. But I just, I can't say enough that if we want our students, the concern around NTI, without a doubt, and it is shared across this state and across this country, that could possibly expand the achievement gap. That kids of means end up having computers and access to this quality instruction, and those that don't have access to computers and to connectivity fall farther behind. And so we are fighting to mitigate that as hard as we can. Our side of it is clearly the devices, but we need some support from our community to assist us in getting Wi-Fi for our students.
Yeah, I would just conclude my thoughts. I would encourage us to talk to Governor Bashir, Mayor Fisher, and Council President David James to make contingency plans, for getting them to make it happen. If it doesn't happen another way, because as you say, I mean, there's a number of course, um, very difficult things that this situation is bringing on people, but at some point things are going to go back to normal for most everybody, and when that happens, we don't want to be in a situation where, as you say, we essentially have two tiers of students.
And let me conclude, Dr. Call, by saying this. We've talked a lot about recently the terminology, not achievement gap, but opportunity gap. And I don't think there's anything that signifies more an opportunity gap for kids than access to computers and access to Wi-Fi, and how much that means on learning on a daily basis, but especially in a crisis situation like this. This is a true opportunity gap.
Thank you.
Chair Porter, District 7 has a question.
Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Polio, some years ago, I had a conversation with some folks from Google about Chromebooks that were cellular cell service enabled, not just Wi-Fi enabled. And the reason we had that conversation is because so many of our students are very mobile, and access to a Wi-Fi hotspot is somewhat difficult. Have you had any discussions with either Google with their Chromebooks, or any thoughts or maybe with Dr. Belcher about trying to find some more cellular or cell phone based enabled Chromebooks that we might be able to use, and perhaps maybe use Sprint's networks because we already have that relationship with them, or AT&T or another mobile provider?
So our Verizon grant, specifically with 5 middle schools, and we're actually bringing on how many more? 6 next year. So 6 middle schools. Are those Chromebooks, the iPads that they have, actually have data plans with them? So we have about 3,000 middle school kids that have an iPad with them that will be able to do this, and will actually be able to connect with the Wi-Fi. And unfortunately, those 6 schools, other middle schools, Carithers being one of them, I believe Carithers is one.
It is.
But they're going to get, that iPad with that on there. We have not had discussions necessarily with that. I will say that we are working right now that Sprint, any child who has a Sprint phone will be able to use that as a hotspot. So I did want to say that as well. But I think that's a valid point that we have to look at moving forward. I haven't had those conversations at this point.
All right. I just know in the past I've had a conversation with Google about that, just talking about that being one of our greatest challenges. And it seems like to me that might be something we can solve on the device side if we partner with Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, whoever, rather than having to rely on a Wi-Fi network. Now, if the city does want to be involved or be a part of this, there are really wide city-wide area Wi-Fi networks that we might be able to enable, or they might be able to build out. That'll be really useful during other emergencies like a tornado and whatnot, but that at least our students might be able to utilize in the near term. So if there's a way for us to have that discussion, that'd be fantastic. I'm sure Dr. Belcher's probably all over it, but I just really want to throw that out there, and just in the off chance no one had thought about it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions,
Chair Porter,
Board Member Craig?
could you just briefly comment on our students with IEPs and ECE instruction, and how this is going to look going forward for those students?
Yeah, Dr. Coleman, can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so we're working really closely with Kim Chevalier, and her team is involved with us, has been involved with us throughout this plan. So one of the things we're going to do is to provide just on our website for teachers, just some guidance about how do you modify in this kind of setting, what kind of what kind of adaptations can you make? And it's a work in progress, and we'll be able to give you more specifics as we go. But one of the things we do have to do is to continue to provide not only the academic services, but also the extras, any additional services like speech and language services, occupational therapy. So we're working on, how to do all of that. So it's
So we'll, continue, it'll look like we could have some virtual ARC meetings. We will have to provide, English captions on any videos and things like that, closed captioning, excuse me. And so offer different languages, translation. So, I mean, the work in this is huge, but we'll continue to update you on what that looks like.
Thank you.
Other questions before I call for the motion? Is there a motion at this time to approve the attached JCPS non-traditional instruction emergency application? Is there a motion by Board Member Craig, seconded by
Second.
Board Member Brady? Okay, and I will now ask for your vote. Dr. Chris?
Vote yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Pastor Shul?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Diane Porter? Yes. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Polio and your team, for doing all the work as we move forward for the good of our students.
Thank you.
There are no information items this evening. And before we do the consent calendar, Dr. Polio had received one question earlier about the contracts that we're approving tonight. So I would like for him to speak to that as opposed to maybe calling that down, so everybody will have a clear understanding about what will happen as we are approving things at the current time. Dr. Polio?
Yes, ma'am. And I think it was a really good question on, we're approving contracts tonight for services at schools where we might not be in school. So I confirmed with our CFO, Cordelia Harden, to ensure that if we are out of school on any of these contracts that are providing services to staff or students, and we're not able to complete those services because of being out of school, those contracts will then be voided. We will not be paying for those contracts if the services aren't provided. So I thought that was a really good question and just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page on that one.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Prior to the start of our meeting, no items had been pulled down from the consent calendar. So at this time, is there anything that needs to be pulled before I ask for the vote for the consent?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sir, Board Member Marshall?
I see we've got field trips on our consent calendar. Is there a purpose for that? I know that we're not doing those now. Is there a reason why?
We, anyone that has been sent in to a school, we ask for board approval. That could be rescheduled. You're approving the field trip itself. If we come back, it could be rescheduled. Obviously, there will be no field trips taken until we lift what we have, which is the suspension of any field trips, obviously with school. But even if we were to come back, we would have to open up field trips again. So you are essentially approving the field trip. It could be rescheduled if that comes, but it will be canceled if we do not have school, obviously.
So is there a date by which we would have to reapprove that field trip? So if it didn't happen by a certain day, then they would have to reapply for that field trip for approval?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I have that answer for you, Mr. Marshall, but I'd be happy to give you that information. Let me gather that. We've got everybody scattered around the building. So usually I would just call someone up to the table.
Right.
There's no table to call anybody up to. So let me get you that information.
Okay, I was just wondering. Thank you.
Are there any other questions before I call for the motion for the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda at this time? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Board Member Craig, seconded by
Board Member Marshall.
Board Member Marshall. Thank you very much. I will now get the vote. Dr. Chris,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Pastor Shul,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Diane Porter, yes, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. This evening, we have one tie bid, and normally I would hand that to my vice chair, which I can't reach through the screen and make that happen. So please trust that I am following the letter of the law, and I don't want to do this on a regular basis, but because this is a special meeting, we need to go on and get the tie broken this evening. You may, from this point on, Dr. Chris, have this opportunity to do this forevermore. Tonight, the tie bid has to do with flashlights, batteries, etc. And so in opening the envelope, the tie bid is going to the Interstate All Battery Center. Interstate All Battery Center. Moving on from there. I think we have tried to check for the, our next meeting will be April the 21st, after everyone has had a wonderful spring break. There may be an opportunity that we do the meeting the same way we're doing it tonight. So I want to thank the board members a lot for being available to make this happen. I thank the community that has called in or dialed in. I've gotten a couple of texts saying I'm watching you. So we are being watched. So thank you for being willing to try something different for the good of the community and in order to keep us all well. That is very, very important. And again, I would like to thank Dr. Polio and his team. For those of us that in our spare time look at Facebook and Twitter, we have a lot of educators that are educating our children away from the building. I'd like to give a shout out to them. They're reading stories, they're playing music. There are a lot of wonderful things that are going on. So thank you for making that happen for our children. It's everybody working together. We will certainly get through this. So there is no other business for this evening. So at this time, at 7:44 p.m., is there a motion to adjourn the March 19 meeting?
So moved.
Mr. Craig, seconded by
Chris Brady.
Mr. Brady. Have to call for the vote again, so I'll talk as fast as I can. Dr. Chris,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes, ma'am. Good night.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Pastor Shul,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Brady,
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Diane Porter, yes, and we are adjourning this meeting at 7:44 p.m. I ask everyone to be safe and stay healthy. Thank you so
Yes.
much for trying this evening. We are adjourned. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Take care, everyone.